going to share some thoughts with you about practice and a few things that have been coming up for me during the retreat this last week also. And I'm not going to give you a guided meditation as such, but I would invite you to just meditate while I share these thoughts. And perhaps that's both serving the purpose of coming together and connecting in our sort of spiritual vibe, and also taking in some ideas, information that can be useful for reflection. So one of the things that's been happening for me, as I've mentioned previously, is there've been some health issues that have been coming up, and I was able to get off of a medication that I realized really clearly after it finishing with it, that it was causing sleep issues and some agitation or anxiety in the body that made it more difficult to meditate. Or at least I was meditating, but it was harder. It was, kind of like having an interference in the signal, so that it was more challenging the deeper calm states weren't as available, weren't as easily available. And so any of us can experience this kind of thing anytime in our practice. Nothing is staying the same in this world. In this experience of human life, things are constantly changing. And we try really hard to, learn the secrets of how to set things up in a way that they're going to come out the way we want them to, but it really isn't possible to control what happens in our environment and in our own bodies. So we need to really experiment, I think, and use the wide variety of practices that the Buddha gave us to help us develop the skill to be able to support the mental development that we're engaging in, and also be able to accept the situation that we find ourselves in at any time. One of the things that I find really helpful is this idea that in any particular situation, we can incline towards peace and relief. And, this text of this is peaceful, this is sublime, the stilling of all formations, the letting go of all attachments, the ending of craving. This kind of idea of like, what does that look like in this present moment, given the circumstance we have? And sometimes what that means is to let ourselves incline in that direction, but not be trying so hard. Sometimes it's the trying hard to make something happen that actually brings more stress and anxiety. So one of the practices I've been using lately is mindfulness of death. And the Buddha talked about this And there are 4 suttas in the Anguttara Nikaya, and they come in pairs. There's 2 in the Book of Sixes, and there are 2 that are almost exactly the same in the Book of Eights, with a couple of extra factors added. You'll see that in the numerical discourses, where the Buddha will talk about something and then, it'll have 6 components, and then he'll talk about it again and it'll have more components. But it's the same kind of thing. And this is mindfulness of death. And he says that when you practice mindfulness of death, it leads to the deathless. It leads to freedom from death. And so this is one of the many different ways we can practice when we're dealing with challenges in the body, challenges in the mind. And this reflection on death can be done in different ways, of course. And the Buddha talked about in 2 of the suttas, the Buddha talks about being so aware that we're going to die at some point. This is one thing we all share. This is a, a clear, common reality for all of us. And what's also very prevalent is the mind's ability to put it off, to act like it's not going to happen, to live as if we're not going to die. And that can lead us to wasting a lot of time and engaging in things that really aren't very important, misusing the time that we have. Excuse me. So reflecting on death can really invigorate our life, that we really recognize what's important and we put our attention there. So as I was taking this into my meditation and really spending time present with this reality, then a number of things came up and might come up as you do it also, where you can reflect upon whether or not, if I were to die today, would I feel like I've said everything that I would have wanted to say to the people in my life? Do I feel like is there any unfinished, I was going to say unfinished business, but it's kind of like, yeah, unfinished resolution of situations with people? Is there anyone I haven't forgiven? Can I forgive myself? Because I don't want to carry any kind of grudge, some negativity hanging around into the next life. Why carry it around now? In a way, the monastic practice of confession every 2 weeks, roughly twice a month, is a way of clearing the slate. And if we can clear the slate from all the past, then we can feel free and at ease. And I've been thinking a fair bit about Ajahn Ganha's teachings, and he's like, set the past to 0. And he's not, I believe he's not talking about the good things. We want to be able to remember those, reflect on those insights that have come through to us, the ways of practicing and developing the mind that have been successful, that have been positive, the things that we've done that are generous and kind, and the things that people have done being kind and supportive of us, we want to recall those. But what we want to set to zero, what we want to let go of is past regrets, the things that bring up agitation, fear, resentment, anger. Those are the things we want to set aside. And if we reflect on our death, if we bring that close to us, well, one of the things that can happen is we really do at some deep level let go of all that baggage. And it's not like it's easy with everything. Some of our past experiences really require some deeper investigation and a lot of loving kindness. And that's good to give that to ourselves. And then, of course, we want to let go of fears of the future too. Our anxieties and worries. If we really help the mind become close to this reality of death coming at some point, really think about the possibility that it could be today, then we're much more likely to let go of the kinds of fears that we generate around the distant future. And I think most importantly, when we reflect on death, we can bring ourselves into that, call it an altered state of consciousness, that shift to spiritual peace and relief. I listened to a talk by Ajahn Sumedho where he was talking about reflecting on death, and of course he was talking about awareness, trusting awareness, as he generally does, and to be able to really just be present with death and observe how that affects the mind. And when Ajahn Sumedho is talking about awareness, it's not just, I think, just being like mindful and present of what's happening or focused on a meditation object or whatever that's coming through the system. It's more than that. It's not just noticing, for example, what the senses are collecting in their experience, but it's really shifting to a way of observing this altered state, the spiritual state of sati and samadhi right there. And Ajahn Gana talks about having sati, samadhi, and panya all the time. It's like really being in a bit of an altered state. It's not coming from a place of an analysis and reasoning, and it's not our kind of what I would say ordinary consciousness of taking in sense data and problem solving and reasoning. It's got a different quality to it. And I think you know what I mean. You probably know what I mean. And when we shift into that kind of state of observing from a basis of Dhamma, the other thing that's true about this shift is that it's not self. That we're not coming to the situation from a place of me and mine, but we're coming to it from a place where our basis is Dhamma. When that any of those spiritual qualities that we talk about, piti and sukha, those are what's present. And when we're dealing with physical challenges with the body or the mental fatigue of the mind that comes with illness or aging or whatever it is, that if we can develop or begin to see ways that we can find relief, relax, a kind of peace and happiness, regardless of body suffering, that there we feel that separation from the body, and we feel a compassion for the body and a compassion for the mind. Finding as much as we can a way to be at ease with what's happening, be present, at ease. And it really is this kind of shift to a state of consciousness that's bright, aware, kind, compassionate. So one of the reflections on death that we can do is right out of the suttas, where the Buddha, two of the suttas I mentioned. So this is, I think, Anguttara Nikaya 6, 19 and 20, or 8, 73, 74, I think is where they are. And in the second part, in the second one of each pair, the Buddha says, you want to practice mindfulness of death when it starts to become morning. You reflect on all the different ways, the different things that could happen that would cause you to die today. And it starts with things like, I could get bitten by a poisonous snake, or a centipede, or a scorpion, or, and that's a reality when you live in the forests in tropical countries. Or I could fall. One translation says I could fall off a cliff. That may not seem all that possible for you today, but you could fall in the bathroom, easily. This is where a lot of people meet the end of this life. And you could decide to drive a car, where there's certainly the potential for a fatal accident anytime. And so the Buddha goes on like this, the things that you could cause your death. You could he said you could have food poisoning, or you could, have some sudden illness, for example. These things, can happen to any of us anytime. So reflecting in this way brings the reality of death into a much more truthful relationship to us. We're really relating to it in a more truthful, more realistic way. And from that, dissolving the fear and anxiety around it. Now, you might say, wait a minute, that doesn't dissolve it for me, it makes it worse. But actually, I think you need to keep going in that case, and recognize that there's much more to the reflection on death than just the fear of it happening. It's when we face it that we really start to overcome that fear. And one of the things that can come up quite strongly is a feeling of compassion for ourselves and compassion for others. One of the things that came up in my practice around this in the last couple of days was a story that I had heard from Gaza. And it was when a journalist arrived at a place that was considered what should have been, or was declared a place of safety, a school, but it had been bombed. And the journalist arrived there and was interviewing someone, and nearby there was a woman sitting on the ground crying. uncontrollably. And the journalist asked the person what had happened to her. And she said that this woman has two children, a 9-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter. And that the week before, they had been staying in another place that was considered to be safe. And it was bombed, and her 9-year-old son was killed. But she and her daughter escaped. They came to this place. Now this one was bombed, and her daughter was killed. And this mother was just inconsolable, crying. And I'm a mother, and I have a son, and I have a daughter. And so I can empathize. And even with that, I know, even with my imagination, I can't really completely imagine how she's feeling. But the compassion is there. And so that when that depth of compassion arises in us, and it's real karuna, it means that it doesn't tend towards sadness. It doesn't tend towards pity. It's really boundless, exalted state of such a deep wish for the suffering to come to an end, for there to be relief, for there to be the realization of Dhamma that helps us to understand and to find comfort, even though everyone we love will be separated from us. Every attachment that we have will dissolve. And it's like this is some of this kind of depth of compassion that then we can turn and bring to our own mind, our own heart, our own experience, to really have compassion for ourselves as well. That kind of depth of compassion is possible when we get this real about the truth of life. And it's freeing. So this freedom from death, this freedom, the realization of nibbana, this is what we're all developing the mind for. And it comes to us not because we will it, of course, but because we're practicing and we keep putting in these causes and conditions. We keep learning how to work with the situations we find ourselves in, and we keep learning how to relate to others fully from a place of love and truth, kindness. So one of the things that came up in the last few days for me is that my job is really to be happy and loving. That happiness comes from the realization of the Dhamma, the application of Dhamma to the situations we find ourselves in every moment. It's not far away, it's right there, right here. And so, like, there's when realizations come about this, then there's this relief. We can't make it happen through reasoning. We can't make it happen through Like intellectually, we can say, yeah, I get that that's the way it is. But the heart doesn't really have that uplift until the realization connects. But it does, it will. This is just part of the way the process works. So to be happy and at ease. So Ajahn Gana talks about this so often. Be happy and at ease. Meditation is easy. You just breathe in happily, breathe out happily, breathe in relaxed, breathe out relaxed. Don't think about what jhana you should be in. Don't try to make anything happen. Just be happy, but always with that inclining towards nibbana, that releasing into a state of consciousness that is filled with spiritual support. And we can tell because those wholesome qualities are there. So in the sutta, after the mendicant focuses on like what can maybe cause the end of my life, then the reflection is, are there any unwholesome qualities that I have not abandoned that could be an obstacle if I were to die today? And he said, if you see those unwholesome qualities, then you practice. You really bring a lot of effort, extraordinary effort and diligence to abandoning those unwholesome qualities. He said, as if your hair was set on fire. And, and then he said, if you don't find unwholesome qualities there, in other words, the slate is already clean, then you just abide in the piti and the sukha, in the joy, in the happiness, and practice just in peace. So this is the question, like what's unfinished? What still needs to be cleared? And can I do that? Can I do that today? And a lot of times we think, oh, it depends on someone else. I have to talk to someone else. They have to have a certain reaction. But that's not true. It doesn't depend on someone else. It depends on our own commitment and diligence and letting go, learning, resolving not to do those same things in that way again. And then the Buddha says the same thing at night. When you get to the evening time, you think about all the ways in which you might pass away during the night. You may know of someone just didn't wake up the next morning. And again, are there any unwholesome qualities? And then that's where the effort comes in, letting go of those, resolving them, learning from them, and freeing ourselves from them. So I'll offer those words for your reflection. And I'd be happy to hear any questions, or if there's some part of this that I've left out. I love it when you fill it in. Any comments or questions, anyone? Yes, James.
This is probably quite a remedial question, really, and I mean, giving us a lot to digest, really. But I just, I've had some good meditation recently, and certainly I was sitting there this morning with the mind all calm and peaceful, and I was thinking, am I in samadhi? Is this samadhi? And I've been at this for 5 years, and I'm not actually clear whether I've actually what's the threshold really? Is it a fact that if the question's there, then probably not, or I don't know. It's like
I don't
what would you say? Yeah.
I don't think you have to I wouldn't necessarily evaluate it based on whether the question is there. Because I think it's natural sometimes for us to ask, where am I on this map? um, but to recognize that what we really want to observe is whether or not the hindrances are gone.
Mm,
So if we are still have hindrances, the 5 hindrances, we want something, we want to get rid of something, the drowsiness, the restlessness, the doubt, then we want to address those and not feel negative or bad about them being there, but address them. It's kind of in the same way as the Buddha is talking about this reflection on death. It's like, are there unwholesome qualities that I haven't resolved? Well, let's go resolve those because I don't want to carry those around in this life or the next. And, I think the main thing is like this idea of trusting awareness. Then if we have awareness of the fact that the mind has this question, then we observe that. What can I learn from that? um, or how do I want to respond to that or address it? But noticing, yeah, so what you're asking is, when are you in that spiritual state or when are we not? And we might be able to recognize a certain feeling. There's a feeling when we're trying to sort something out analytically, reason about things. And one of the indicators is how much selfing is there here. Because when we're really in that kind of sati, samadhi, and panya, the sense of self is really pretty much faded out of the picture. So I do think we have some gauges to use to see, where am I and what should I do? And the truth is, I think that there are so many approaches to meditation. There are so many experiences that come in the spiritual landscape that we don't have to try to just follow a model that someone else has presented. But in fact, we can, just see how does this relate to the guidance that the Buddha gave about what is samadhi. There are so many different definitions. Some people, it's like it's the 4 jhanas. If you want to get enlightened, you got to have the fourth jhana. And you have other people who are like, Ajahn, how deep does a samadhi need to be? Not that deep.
mm,
I think the point is the Buddha talked about the different ways by wisdom, by the serenity of the mind. There are different ways that awakening occurs. And we need to learn about our own mind and, what's peaceful. If we're heading towards what's peaceful, we're going in the right direction. Keep going in the right direction.
thank you. I really wanted like a 10-point checklist so I could tick it off, but I'm
That's
kidding, of
right.
course, because it's not like that. Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. This is something we all experience. Yeah. Cynthia?
Thank you. So there are kind of two parts to this question, based on a couple different things that you were talking about. But the first thing that came up in terms of reflecting on death, well, I've been doing a lot of that in the last few years. Just it's been coming up, um, and and mostly up until recently. um, it's been okay. It's like, yeah, that's how it goes. I'm gonna die. People are gonna die, and there's been some sense of acceptance and ease about that.
Mhm.
But just recently, and I'm not sure why. Well, the other thing is that in the last few months, it's been even much more real because, like, in the last couple of months, six people that I've known well have died. Well, one of them was a cat, but still. Um, and so it's like, yeah, it's really gonna happen. But but what has changed for me is that now a lot of fear is coming up,
Mm.
not about dying itself, but about what happens next, and fear about, like, I've done a lot of practice and I've been very committed to my practice, but it's like I don't think I'm certainly don't think I've done enough to, go right into enlightenment. And so there's like all this fear of, like, life has been so hard, and especially the last. I was thinking the other day, like, this year has been just a year of hell, and so when I think about death, it's like I don't want to go through this again, and there's not much I can do. I mean, I'm doing what I can do. I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm practicing. I'm doing all
Yeah.
that stuff. So anyway, that's what's coming up for me around it.
Yeah. I
Um,
think it's, yeah. I mean, you know that, I think you know that the way you've handled the situations that have come up over the last year or so, or a couple of years, has been really an inspiration to many of us. And when we're in it and we're doing it, it might not feel very inspiring. And also, I think all of us, it's good to develop the reflections that help bring some relief when we have these fears arising. One of them is to trust karma.
mm,
Yes, it's been hard, but it's also been manageable. And yes, it's hard. It's hard to have pain in the body. It's hard to face, these health crises and the problems that come up with aging and sickness. But it's also the case that the mind is still able to observe what's happening, even observe the fears arising. There is that ability still to step back and see this through the eyes, through the lens of Dhamma. And when we do that, then we have more trust in karma. So if we do come back, we set our intention to come back in a situation where we can practice Dhamma,
mm,
come back in a situation where we can be generous and kind, you know. So it's like, setting our course. You're setting your course with your practice, and we need to set our course with the way our mind works. And it's not like we can control whether fear is going to arise or something else, but we can step back and observe with that Dhamma reflection and awareness and kindness, compassion. So it's what we just need to keep doing. And there is relief in it. When we're afraid, we're actually clinging to some sense of self. And even though we don't want to go through it again, when well, I don't know if I can say that. Um, how much are we going to remember from this life the next time we come? You know, there's probably going to be some renewed sense of energy to take on the next situation in a different body. And so trusting the continuation of the good karma that you've had, and trusting that all of these good actions are adding to that. You have to kind of see, well, what is it that helps this mind relax, let go?
Yeah, that reflection on karma is very helpful, because you talked about, um, reflecting on your life, and was anything, relationships that you needed to, clean up. And it's like, I've done that, especially one big one that was hanging on there, and I took care of that. But just like knowing, having some assurance that I've done done what I could, and done a lot to cultivate generosity, and et cetera, that hopefully that'll carry me through to something that won't be so horrible. So that's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and really contemplating, reflecting on all of those beautiful qualities of generosity and kindness and virtue and
Mhm.
faith, and the selflessness that we're capable of as human beings. It's amazing. It's amazing that we can look at other people, and we can look at beautiful stories where people risk their lives to save someone they don't even know. This is a capacity of human heart, the human heart, that we have these capacities. We have the ability to develop the mind, the heart, and keep taking in and listening to what's positive and encouraging, and let go of all of the nonsense in the world. Don't overwhelm ourselves with the many, many negative stories, because there are the many, many positive stories that we should be using to enliven and lift up ourselves.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia. Val?
I just want to thank you for everything you've said this morning, Aya. It's been really inspirational. I think I'm in that time of my life where I am seeing the resolution that I need to come to in certain relationships. And I love I had forgotten about reflecting on all the ways that you could die. That's really inspirational. I know when I go out on the freeway here in the Bay Area in California, that's the one place that I have a visceral fear that I could die, because there are people that are driving insane, like middle of the day, and they're going 100 miles an hour, weaving in and out of traffic. And every time I get in my car to go on the freeway, I'm like, I hope I don't get in an accident. There's a lot of fear. And then when someone cuts me off like that, then there's a lot of anger. And this is just a great reframing to get in my car and go, okay, I could die. What do I need to improve? Where's the wholesomeness? How can, the efforts, it's those 4 efforts. It's just really inspirational. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Val. I know what you mean. Sometimes we've had the situation where we're hauling something like with the pickup truck, and we don't want to be on the freeways, so we do the no freeway option on Google Maps, and it takes us on all these back roads, and it's so much more peaceful. You can still die there, but it's not the same. I know what you're talking about. People drive so crazy now. this cutting off your car so short and weaving between cars, it's really quite scary. But to use this as a reflection is so important. Because like I said, you know, you could slip in the bathroom. How many times have we used the bathroom in our lifetime? Thousands, thousands and thousands and thousands. But there could be one time when that's it. It's a very high kind of probability, apparently, that something could happen in there, you know, that's it. It's not the most glamorous way to go, but you know, this is the reality of human life. Yeah. And to use this all as a means for inspiration and encouragement to really clear the slates. Yes, Joni.
Hi, I just wanted to also thank you for the reflections that you gave this morning. I feel much lighter in spirit. It helped the remembrance of Dhammic peace and joy, and my mind feels much less fettered, at least at this moment. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I'm very glad it was recorded because I want to listen to it again and again, probably. Thank you.
Great. You're welcome. Yeah, it's really good to find things that we've got so much available online that, you know, you can find something from any of these. I mean, of course, I'm usually recommending monastic teachers. They just, you know, my experience. I mean, obviously, I'm a little bit biased, but and it doesn't mean that there aren't lay teachers that have fabulous teachings out there. I know there are, but you know, whoever really is practicing with that kind of level of renunciation and willingness to really look reality directly in the face. Sometimes, you know, we find something that really is inspiring to us and calming, and you want to listen to it over and over again because it is so hard to keep the mind on track sometimes. To, you know, we forget and we need to be reminded. And we forget and we need our friends, our Kalyanamitas, to remind us we can help each other. And I really feel like that's a lot of what happens in this community and other Dhamma communities, where, you know, you create these friendships and you have this wholesome, beautiful kind of environment we create with our energy and our kindness, our compassion. And we really, it's very helpful if we make use of that. So I want to thank everyone for that, your participation in that.